25 things you didn't know about The Lord of the Rings. 1. Let's start with something everyone knows, but most people get the order wrong on. J.R.R. Tolkien didn't write a story first. He created a language first. He designed the grammar, the sound structure, and even the historical evolution of the Elvish languages he called Quenya and Sindarin. Only then did he ask himself, who might speak this language? Middle-earth, in a very real sense, was born as the answer to that question. 2. There's a story that circulates online. When Tolkien's editor supposedly wanted to correct the word dwarves as a misspelling, Tolkien is said to have replied, "I wrote that dictionary. Don't correct me." That exact line is an internet humor exaggeration. But the real story behind it is far more interesting. Between 1919 and 1920, Tolkien genuinely worked as an editor on the Oxford English Dictionary. He was the one who clarified the etymology of the word walrus. Years later, while writing The Hobbit, he deliberately wrote dwarves instead of dwarfs and never walked it back. When his editor tried to correct it, Tolkien pushed back, and years afterward, in Appendix F of The Lord of the Rings, he defended the choice in writing, saying he used this form to set dwarves a little apart from the sillier tales of these latter days. The reason dwarves is standard usage today comes down entirely to this stubbornness. 3. There's a very common misconception that Mordor directly represents Germany, but Tolkien himself explicitly rejected this in the preface to his book, writing that he cordially disliked allegory. That said, one thing is undeniable. Tolkien fought in the trenches himself at the Battle of the Somme during World War I and lost most of his closest friends. Mordor's ravaged, smoke-choked, nature-destroying landscape is, according to many scholars, fueled by an emotional response to the devastated ground of the Western Front, not a one-to-one national allegory, but the trace of a deep trauma. 4. Sauron wasn't originally an independent evil force. He was Melkor's, that is, Morgoth's, most powerful servant. When Morgoth was defeated and cast out, Sauron wanted to make his own power permanent. Disguised as Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, he infiltrated the elven smiths of Eregion, shared his craft knowledge with them, and together they forged the Rings of Power, 3 for the elves, 7 for the dwarves, 9 for men. Then, in secret, he poured a great portion of his own spirit into the One Ring, building a master key that could control all the others. That's the reason Sauron himself was destroyed when the ring was destroyed. Quite literally, he had trapped a piece of his own being inside that object. 5. Dwarves exist by working nature, carving it, transforming it, a powerful but intrusive kind of craft. In fact, the excessive digging in Moria wakes the Balrog and brings about their own downfall. Elves, on the other hand, live in harmony with nature, almost as an extension of it. The scene where Legolas walks across snow without leaving a footprint captures this exactly. Elves exist by passing through the world without changing it. 6. Galadriel gives Gimli 3 strands of her hair. This scene isn't a film-only edition. It comes straight from the book. There's a deep-seated mistrust between elves and dwarves left over from the old enmity in Moria. Galadriel giving Gimli something she never gave even to the greatest lords of the elves is a deliberate gesture to close that ancient rift. The friendship that develops between Gimli and Legolas from this moment on carries one of Tolkien's central messages. Different peoples must act together against a common enemy. 7. Arwen is an elf, immortal by nature. Aragorn is a man. In Tolkien's world, death comes to an elf in one of 2 ways: in battle or through unbearable grief, suffering so much after the death of a mortal loved one that they can no longer go on, and their spirit withdraws from the world. That's exactly why Elrond fears this fate for his daughter. Arwen's choice to stay with Aragorn effectively means giving up her immortality and accepting human death. One of the biggest philosophical questions in Tolkien's universe: is death a curse or a gift? 8. The opening narration of the film,
"The world is changed.
I feel it in the water," was actually first recorded by Elijah Wood, playing Frodo. But the team realized Frodo hadn't witnessed those events and scrapped it. Next, they tried Ian McKellen as Gandalf. That didn't work either, because Gandalf wasn't present for those events either. In the end, they settled on Cate Blanchett's Galadriel, because as an elf, she had genuinely lived through that history, and it also emphasized the timelessness of the elves. On top of that, the studio, New Line Cinema, had asked for a short, 2-minute opening. Peter Jackson delivered a 7.5-minute one instead. 9. The Fellowship of the Ring consists of exactly 9 members: Gandalf, Aragorn, Boromir, Legolas, Gimli, Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin. That number wasn't chosen at random. Tolkien deliberately built it as a counterweight to Sauron's 9 ringwraiths, the Nazgul. In the book, in the chapter The Council of Elrond, Elrond says it outright. The company shall be 9, and the 9 walkers shall be set against the 9 riders that are evil. So this numerical symmetry isn't a coincidence or a screenwriting trick. It's a deliberate literary contrast built by the author himself. 9 different peoples who came together freely, set against 9 enslaved shadows. 10. The technique that makes dwarves and hobbits look small isn't CGI at all. It's called forced perspective. Actors are positioned diagonally along the same line as the camera, with one standing close to the lens and the other farther back. In the tea scene at Bag End, Gandalf sits at a small table close to the camera, while Frodo sits at an oversized table far from the camera. From the camera's angle, the two appear to be sitting at the very same table. 11. The hardest part of this technique was that the camera couldn't stay still. The crew built a second dolly to carry the background set pieces. This second dolly moved in sync with the camera dolly, so the illusion never broke, even mid-shot. The actors couldn't even look directly into each other's eyes because their eye lines were at different heights, so even eye contact had to be carefully choreographed. 12. Multiple copies of the One Ring were used on set. One of them, roughly the size of a human head, was built purely for close-up shots. The goal being to make the elvish inscription and the light reflections on its surface read clearly on camera. Even the chain on that iconic ring in the snow shot is said to have been strong enough to tow a truck. 13. John Rhys Davies, who played Gimli, was actually tall in real life, noticeably taller than the Hobbit actors, who stood around 5 feet 6 inches, including Elijah Wood. So why did that help with proportion? Because remember, dwarves are already a taller race than hobbits to begin with. The target Gimli needed to hit on screen was this: noticeably shorter than the men, Aragorn, Legolas, Gandalf, but still clearly taller than the hobbits. Since Rhys Davies' actual height already sat somewhere between those 2 points, the crew could hit that target simply by shrinking him slightly with forced perspective. If the actor had been average height or shorter, they would have needed a third entirely separate camera setup to correctly differentiate him from both men and hobbits. So paradoxically, the actor being too tall in real life is exactly what made him proportionally correct as a dwarf on screen. 14. Some of the sweeping wide shots of massive cities like Minas Tirith weren't CGI at all. Weta Workshop built physical miniature sets, some of them many meters tall, with incredible detail. These are called bigatures, a blend of big and miniature. These sets were shot with real light and real smoke. That's one of the biggest reasons the films still don't look dated today. Physical realism ages far better than CGI does. 15. In massive battle scenes like Helm's Deep and the Pelennor Fields, every single soldier on screen was, in fact, its own independently thinking. Peter Jackson's team developed a piece of software specifically for this, called Massive. It gave every fighter its own library of movements and a simple decision-making logic, so thousands of figures behaved like genuinely independent individuals rather than obvious copies of one another. The software was so successful that it's still used in Hollywood today for crowd scenes in other films. 16. Remember the scene where Aragorn, believing Merry and Pippin are dead, furiously kicks an Uruk-hai helmet lying on the ground? After the 4th take, Peter Jackson said, "Let's try one more." On the 5th take, Viggo Mortensen struck the helmet with real force and broke 2 toes. The scream and the collapse that followed were entirely genuine pain. The take worked so well that the crew put it straight into the film. 17. Christopher Lee, who played Saruman, was the only actor in the cast who had actually met Tolkien while he was alive, a brief meeting back in the 1950s. On top of that, decades before the films were even made, Lee had a personal habit of rereading The Lord of the Rings cover to cover every single year. He'd actually wanted the role of Gandalf badly. 18. In The Return of the King, during the scene where Saruman is stabbed in the back, Peter Jackson began explaining to Lee how he wanted him to scream. Lee stopped him and asked, "Do you know what sound a person makes when they're stabbed in the back?" because I do. Lee explained that in reality, the air is driven out of the lungs on impact, so the sound wouldn't be a scream, but a choked gasp. He then began mentioning some clandestine operations from World War II. Jackson decided not to press the subject any further. Lee really had served as a volunteer in the Finnish army during the war, and later as an intelligence officer in the British Royal Air Force. 19. Sean Bean, who played Boromir, refused to board the helicopters the crew used due to his fear of flying. Instead, to reach the high mountain filming locations, he made a roughly 2-hour climb every single morning in full Boromir costume and makeup. His fellow actors said that from a distance, he looked almost like a tiny fly climbing the mountain. 20. The 9 actors who played the Fellowship of the Ring got matching tattoos after filming wrapped to make their bond permanent. The word 9 written in the Tengwar alphabet. The one exception was John Rhys Davies, who chose not to get one. Instead, the tattoo was offered to his stunt double, Brett Beatty, who had spent so much time doubling for him on set that he nearly earned a co-credit. 21. John Rhys Davies suffered serious allergic reactions to the prosthetic makeup used throughout filming. At times, his eyes would swell shut. That's why years later, when he was offered the chance to reprise Gimli in the Hobbit trilogy, he politely declined, saying, "I don't think my face could take that punishment again." 22. A little-known fact, John Rhys Davies, who played Gimli, also voiced the giant Ent, Treebeard. The two characters are almost never in a scene together, which is why most viewers never notice. Rhys Davies has called it the hardest part of his career, because in his own words, how do you voice something that doesn't have lungs? 23. Gollum is one of the earliest major examples in film history of performance capture technology, giving a character this level of emotional depth. Andy Serkis didn't just provide the voice, he physically performed the scenes on set alongside the other actors, which meant Elijah Wood and Sean Astin were genuinely acting opposite a real scene partner. The footage was later digitally transformed into Gollum's model. 24. Composer Howard Shore didn't just write beautiful music for these films. He built a distinct, recurring musical theme for every people and every region. A warm, folk-inflected theme for the Shire, a theme evoking hoofbeats for Rohan, grand brass for Gondor, low, unsettling choral music for Mordor. These themes evolve as the story moves forward. Frodo's theme, for instance, grows more fragile and fractured as the weight of the ring increases. 25. In Bernard Hill's iconic speech before the Battle of Helm's Deep, the rain wasn't a special effect. It was genuine, unplanned New Zealand weather. The crew made a deliberate choice to keep that natural atmosphere in the scene, and it only heightened the moment's dramatic weight. These 25 facts point to something bigger. The greatness of The Lord of the Rings doesn't come from its story alone. It comes from a linguist's lifelong act of world-building, from a death scene shaped by the voice of a war veteran, from broken toes, from an actor climbing a mountain, and from a production philosophy that insisted on being real. Which fact surprised you the most? Let's talk about it in the comments.